afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to this meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee for Monday, February 25th. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the Committee, joined by my colleagues, Mr. Kretz, Mr. Price, and Mr. Blumenfield, and we are ready to begin today's meeting. Members, I would have proposed items 5, 10, 11, and 12 for consent approval. I'd like you to take a moment and have a look at those. We do have cards on those matters, so we'll be taking comment before we get to that.
5, 10, 11, and 12?
5, 10, 11, and 12. And before we take those items up, I'm also going to be asking, I'm also going to be continuing items 7 and 8. We'll continue those at least until the next meeting when we may be taking those up. So that brings us then, we'll go ahead and take our multi-item public comment cards so we can get those disposed of. So we'll call up first Wayne Spindler and Eric Previn.
Okay. That's interesting. I'll let the assholes, they're going to pick us first. Very good.
Run the clock.
What? Yeah, the Armenian asshole told you to start the clock. Okay, now we get to, let's see here, item number 1. Yeah, I haven't been to meetings in a while here. I'm just trying to get warmed up. Item 1 is Atkins Diet versus City of Los Angeles. Disability discrimination. If you're disabled, raise your hand. No, all of you should be raising your hand. Most Americans have a disability, yes. And many of them work in this fucking city with these assholes in charge here. And what they do is they hurt badly. Emotional, metaphysical injuries. Oh, and there's one right now that's injured. He's a drug addict, Mike Bonin. And that's another form of
agenda items, or you're going to be tossed.
Yeah, okay, asshole. So, again, we want to support this fine person, Mr. Atkins, or if you're transgender, Ms. Atkins. Okay, and then we get to number 2. Number 2 involves the police department's attempted murder on Helen Langley, yes. Murdering cops, you disgusting pigs. If I was another puppet, I would go oink, but I can't. And so I will agree that this case should settle for $900,000. What do you say? Thank you. And then number 3, Jane Doe. And the reason it's Jane Doe is he used to be John Doe, but the police department cut off his cock, and so she became Jane Doe. See, that's the way it works. Fuck you, settle it for $500,000, and finally to everybody, bah! Thank you so much, asshole. Well done, thank you.
Mr. Previn.
Yes, he wants to use
my So this is not the general, this is the items.
Right.
Got it. Okay, thank you. It's Eric Previn from CD2. I live in Studio City. I'll make a note for Bonin, who came in a little late, that the urban canopy items, which I was so excited about, they're going to be staffing up the urban canopy and the urban forest both. But Krikorian has continued it, but we are still commenting on it just because we wanted to get that into the record that they're continuing it. You could see actually a nice presentation by Krikorian where he was the lone vote on a SoCal Connected about the trees. And I think everybody agrees that now is a good time to save our trees in Studio City. And I think things are working well. We're getting notifications about the trees that are going to be taken out along Ventura Boulevard. That got a little bit, some of us a little caught off guard, but I think it's good that we have some kind of an infrastructure. Now, Cisco, I don't think anybody loves Cisco more than certainly Koretz and Arnie Berghoff, who is their lobbyist. Now, I did a little look because they've got a refund today for $150 something thousand for Cisco Systems. These are the guys they're in the call center business, Bon, and they love a good call center, and the thing they like about it is they get paid a ton for running the infrastructure. I came in contact with them for the first time over at County Board of Supervisors, where Mike Antonovich and Berghoff are waving on a series of call centers. It works very well for them when they're rolling out operations to ticket and cite people, so they're very, very good. But the question is, to give them a refund when we can't see kind of the particulars has been the thing that I've been really opposed to and trying to shine the brightest possible light on. It's the idea that we're cutting a deal on some taxes based on some wonky rules that Shahid down in Claire Bartel's office understands, but he won't go into it too much because every case is separate and you can't look at the taxes. That's where we ran into trouble with Richard Weintraub, with the folks out at the Sportsman's Lodge and all that stuff. So I'm just hoping that we can get this thing straightened up so that the public has a feeling that it's not just private deals, that they're deals that the public is making eyes wide open. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Next speaker is Michael Hunt, Red Chief Hunt.
Again, thank you for addressing me by my correct name, Red Chief Hunt. In the history of the city attorney's office, it would be beneficial for them to settle out all contracts and all lawsuits because they don't have attorneys to actually act and prevail in court. It's been a recent notice that 99% of the lawsuits have been prevailed by the people and things like that. So with that, Bernard Park said it best. It would be a lot cheaper to settle out in or out of court than it would in court because it costs the city $600,000. Now, I think the new minimum average case now is charged $1 million on each side because the city attorney has to hire outside attorneys and things like that. So with all the lawsuits and things like that, I think that you guys should settle out immediately and be effective in that way and save the city some money. The Red Chief Hunt.
All right. Thank you. And that concludes our multi-item public comments. So members, 1 second, please. Yes, so we have no more cards or comments on items 5, 10, 11, and 12. So if there's no objection, it'll be the action of the committee to go ahead and approve each of those items. And that will bring us then to item number 6.
Item number 6 is the Commission on Revenue Generation second quarterly report.
Good afternoon. I'm Jan Breidenbach. I'm the chair of the Los Angeles Revenue Commission, and since our last report, we have been continuing our work. Sorry, I have this little frog there. On financial transparency in the pension funds of the city, we have collected information. The two major funds have been very cooperative and given us a lot of information. We've been doing some in-house analysis, basically ourselves, and are looking for a consultant to see if some of our analysis matches up with what an independent consultant would say. We've also, since our last quarter, put together the report for the pilot program, the payments in lieu of taxes, and that went out to bid, and it has been, it was bid upon. Blue Sky Consulting on our vendor list, the city's vendor list, is doing the research. We expect that by summer. And we're looking forward to see what they find. They're looking at a complete statewide analysis of what are the impediments, what are the possibilities of doing pilots in California, and then bringing it down. What is the possibility of doing one in Los Angeles? What would we look at? What would we glean? How much might we get, et cetera? So those are the two big items since we last spoke.
Very good. Thank you. Members, any questions for Commissioner Breidenbach? Mr. Blumenfield?
Just curious, I mean, it's all good and good report back. So just the pilot programs, I couldn't quite get my head around how that works. Maybe just give us, what is the real benefit for the city in those? What are we looking for in the report?
There are, I believe, 50 or 60 pilot programs in larger cities across the country. They're not real prevalent, but what they are is negotiations with the larger nonprofits in the city who do not pay property taxes to have some sort of payment that they do in lieu of taxes for the services that they receive that come to the city from property taxes.
They're not paying the property taxes.
No, they're exempt. They're exempt from property
So
taxes.
what is it in lieu of?
They would make a payment in lieu of taxes, which they don't pay. It's just the name of how it works, but it's payments in lieu of taxes.
But it's not, they're not actually substituting out a tax that they're paying. It's a new thing.
No, they're exempt by law from property taxes. So this is simply a way for local jurisdictions sometimes to talk to very large nonprofits who have, hospitals, universities, and stuff about possibly giving some revenue to the city. The biggest one has been in Boston, which is a much smaller city. They also have lots of hospitals and universities, but it's been very useful for the city budget in Boston. It's the one I'm most familiar with. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, members? Okay, if there's no objection, we'll go ahead and receive and file the second quarterly report, and look
Thank
forward
you.
to seeing you next time. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Okay, that'll bring up item number 4.
Item number 4 is the City Administrative Officer and Department of City Planning reports relative to the administration and implementation of the Home Sharing Ordinance. Planning and Land Use Management and Personnel and Animal Welfare Committees waive consideration of this matter.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Matt Glesney. I'm with the Department of City Planning Housing Policy Unit, and I'll be walking you through our report to this committee dated January 31st. I'll just note that this report updates items that are relevant to this committee from the department's prior report dated November 28th. That report had been referred to the Budget and Finance Committee by the full council upon passage of the Home Sharing Ordinance back in December, and can be found as an attachment to our more current report. The January 31st report summarizes the department's recommended staffing and contractual services needed to be ready to successfully administer and implement the Home Sharing Ordinance when it becomes effective on July 1st of this year. The department has provided several recommended actions to the City Council related to these resource needs in the full report. A separate supplemental budget report for fiscal year 1920 will be made through the regular budgetary process for additional staffing resources needed for implementation after the ordinance is in effect. So these are immediate needs just to get the program up and running for July 1st. By way of a bit of background, the recently adopted Home Sharing Ordinance legalizes a type of short-term rentals. Those are rentals for less than 30 days in one's own primary residence, something we're calling home sharing. The ordinance creates a new online mobile-based registration process as well as a new regulatory system aimed at enhancing enforcement options against hosts and platforms operating outside of the legal framework. We know how important enforcement of this ordinance is. Today, the typical complaint-based process is not proven easy because of the nature of short-term rental. The ordinance is designed to dramatically increase effectiveness by creating more enforcement tools and more tailored regulations, but that does require additional staffing and resource needs. First, in terms of contractual services, as we said throughout the development of this ordinance, success of the home sharing ordinance depends in large part on the assistance of a new proactive technology-based approach. This includes creation of an online registration portal with the ability to authenticate documents and verify eligibility requirements in real time. Because hosting platforms generally don't share address information until a booking has been made, information technology tools such as web harvesting and property geolocation are also needed to help identify illegal short-term rental listings. The Plum Committee also specified that the home sharing program should include a 24/7 hotline where complaints could be received and properly addressed. We've also been discussing with Department of Building and Safety, Housing and Community Investment Department, and City Attorney ways to efficiently utilize our enforcement staff by assigning many of the administrative tasks in terms of sending notices and verifying violations to this third-party service. In line with this previous City Council direction, the Department has been working closely with the Office of City Attorney to move forward technology-based options for securing a vendor that can provide these services and more, including tax collection and monthly reporting services. The Department has developed a comprehensive proposed scope of services for short-term rental registration, monitoring, and compliance with a company called Host Compliance, who is also here in case you have any questions for them. And the scope is an attachment A of your report. There is a secondary request for contractual services, and that's for an administrative fee study to to determine the appropriate per-night fee that can be charged to guests to cover the remaining expenses for the costs to administer and enforce the home sharing program. We plan to utilize a contractor from the city's bench of economic consultants. In terms of staffing positions, the department also requests resources and position authorities to enable the creation of a new home sharing unit that will staff the administration and implementation of the ordinance. Assuming the contractual services are employed, we believe initial staffing can be limited to 6 positions to perform core functions. These 6 positions, a mix of planners, administrative clerks, and management analysts, are needed prior to the July 1st in order to initiate the home sharing program, being able to accommodate the expected 10 to 15,000 registrations we expect. It's a heavy load, so even with a largely automated process, there will be many cases that require individual attention and a lot of good administration to maintain record keeping. The staff will also be managing the consultant contract, coordinating data sharing and enforcement activities between agencies, preparing outreach materials and reports, and communicating with hosts and platforms. In addition to the staffing needs, it's also necessary to secure office space at Figueroa Plaza for the home sharing unit in order to accommodate the additional staff. So we've recommended that the CAO work with General Services Department and our department to evaluate options to identify space at Big Plaza. Finally, in terms of funding this program, the full costs for the recommended staffing and contractual services had been anticipated to be funded by a mix of 3 revenue sources, including a 10% dedication of the TOT, transient occupancy tax, that was to be derived from home sharing activities. Number 2, a per-night fee for administration and enforcement, as I just mentioned, at a fee amount that is to be determined by that fee study. And 3, home sharing registration and application fees. The TOT and per-night fees were to be deposited in a new short-term rental enforcement trust fund, which would have allocated resources each year with City Council and Mayor approval. However, a section of the home sharing ordinance to establish this trust fund and the 10% TOT was removed from the adopted ordinance and instead had been referred to this committee. That leaves us with the per-night fee and the registration fees. While registration fees are subsidized, considering the full cost to implement the home sharing program, the per-night fee could be established at a rate to cover the cost of registration, this registration subsidy, and render the administration and enforcement of the home sharing ordinance full cost recovery. The registration fees and per-night fees will not begin to generate revenue until July and will take time to accumulate. But again, provided the administrative fee study accurately estimates costs and expected revenues, the program costs should be considered full cost recovery. However, an upfront allocation is needed to cover costs to be prepared by the July 1st start date. In conclusion, the department recommends that the City Council authorize position authorities necessary to appropriately staff the work program and authorize the controller to appropriate and advance funding for contractual services and salaries from the reserve fund to the Department of City Planning's fund for expenditures as detailed in the report. The reserve fund advancements can be reimbursed by the various revenue sources when the ordinance is effectuated. That concludes our report summary. We're happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Did you want to add on?
We're just here to answer questions on our report in case.
Okay. All right, questions, members? Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the department or host compliance going to do anything to get an estimate of how many registrants are expected before July 1st?
Yes, sure. Matt Glesney Planning, based on the numbers of listings that are out there today and some estimates based on similar ordinances in other cities, we've estimated of the roughly 29,000 listings that are in existence in Los Angeles, maybe 10 to 15,000 would be eligible to continue under the program after July 1st, and that's how many registrations we expect. Somewhere, it's hard to know for sure. Our ordinance is different than every other city's, but based on what we've seen in some other cities and the reductions in the numbers, we're thinking perhaps about a 50% reduction, getting us to 10 to 15,000.
And what other jurisdictions has host compliance helped create home sharing systems for, and what's their experience been like?
Yeah, they are here. My best information, I believe they're operating in over 200 cities, cities such as Denver, Pasadena, Nashville, I know is another large city, a number of large cities, Miami, Chattanooga, some other cities they've been operating in. Yeah. But they're also here to answer any other additional questions you may have.
Yeah, the other question I have is for them is if groups like Airbnb aren't willing to provide the information, how do they get the information on the addresses of hosts?
Why don't we go ahead and have them come on up then?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. My name is Ulrich Binzer. I'm the founder and CEO of Host Compliance. To answer maybe first question about who we work with, as Mr. Glesney mentioned, we work with 230 different cities across North America on enforcement of these types of ordinances. To mention a couple of larger cities that might be good parallels, City of San Antonio, City of Denver, City of Nashville, City of Las Vegas, City of Orlando. We just got a contract with Boston. So we have a lot of experience working in large markets and have been doing this for 4 years. To answer the second question, obviously the big issue here is that the platforms have not traditionally been very forthcoming with information for lots of privacy and other reasons. So what we do is we scan the 54 largest vacation rental websites every 3 days, take screenshots of every single listing out there, and then we identify the exact address of those properties. And then we provide that information to our clients so they can compare that list with the list of registered or permitted properties. So that is part of the services that we provide.
Okay, and have some cities had more difficulty than others?
Sure.
And what's an example of one of the toughest ones you've had and how you handled it?
Sorry. Yeah. So the hardest cities to work in are the places where there are complete bans on short-term rentals, because in those circumstances, short-term rental hosts go through great efforts to disguise where they're operating. So some examples would be the city of Carmel, California, where there's a complete ban. There also happens to be no street addresses in the city of Carmel, so everyone has a post mailbox, which makes everything a little bit difficult because there are no real addresses or parcel numbers. So that would be a harder example, but even cities like that, we have had a tremendous success.
Good. And is there difficulty in coordinating between online registration and in-person registration done at public counters? How do you merge those two?
Sure. Planning, Matt Glesney. You're right, we anticipate applications to come online, but we also will have our public counter available for in-person registrations. We plan to essentially make sure we're diligent on combining those two sources into one central database, so that at the end of the day, we're working from one central database that has all the registrations that have been approved or are pending in one spot. That just will require some coordination from our staff that we're asking for here.
So we're not anticipating any great difficulty.
I don't anticipate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonnet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the staff for preparing the report and bringing this forward. This damn ordinance took 3-4 years to get passed, and the trick to the whole thing was, is it going to be enforceable? The current system isn't even close to enforceable, and as we were doing this, we knew this was going to be the biggest challenge of all. And I think when we started this, back in the 60s or whenever the hell it was, you didn't exist, or at least we weren't aware of you, and we weren't really sure how we were going to do this. And I think there was a moment over the past couple of years when your business model started taking off where we realized, okay, there might be a way to make this work. So I'm glad to see this before us. It's really very, very important that we do this, and there's really not a lot of other ways to do it. Because if we hit July 1 and we've wasted 3 or 4 years of effort and promises and commitments and concessions from all of the different interests that were part of this, it would be a shame. I have a question, because I'm fairly confident, and I sort of understand the process that Mr. Koretz was asking about, how you sort of scrape the information and all that. Who, is it planning, is it host compliance? Who determines whether or not the unit being used or the home being used is actually a primary residence?
Right. Matt Glesney, Planning. So that's the whole reason we need a registration process. We need folks to come forward and establish and prove that it is their primary residence that they wish to rent out. So that has to do with verifying who you are through photo identification. And so there's a system in place that host compliance actually operates to authenticate IDs so we know who you are. But then there would be secondary pieces of information to establish that it's your primary residence for more than half the year. And we've been a little cagey about exactly those documents, just not wanting to put that out there, allowing the fraud to sort of be developed. But
Create a black market for documents.
There's certainly the potential for fraud when there's this much money to be made. So I think host compliance has been very helpful. What they've seen as best practices in other cities in terms of the types of identification that is hardest to authenticate. And I think in large part they're relying on things like voter registration, things that are verified, and you'd be committing fraud to a state agency by you're approving your primary resident for voting or something like that. So once you've done that, you've sort of it's sort of a high bar that you've had to get past. It's not something kind of minor. You've actually committed fraud at the state level or the federal level. So without getting into all the details, I think we're looking at documents that are hard to fake and that can show that you've established your primary residence to somebody else.
Assuming we were to approve this and council considered it and approved it in a relatively expeditious manner, how close are we cutting it to be able to actually get a system up and running for July 1? It's right around the corner.
Sure. Planning, Matt Glesney. We are cutting it close. We are. It is going to take time to really develop the kind of online and robust system that we wanted to develop. Every day does matter. We're eager to move it forward, but I think at this point we've heard that we're going to be able to get it done, but we are cutting it a bit tight.
Okay.
Arthi Varma, just to add from Planning Department, we are going to be issuing administrative guidelines that would sort of document in more detail the primary residency requirements and also lay out a rollout process to ensure that hosts have the ability to register in a timely manner.
And what is the, I don't imagine Budget and Finance is going to want to take up this issue every month or so, and I get the impression Plum isn't all that eager to take it up either. What is going to be the mechanism of reporting back to the council so we know how implementation is going, how we know what things are looking like, a month out, how things are looking 3 months in?
Arthi Varma, Planning Department. We're looking at being able to do a report back on how the program is going on an annual basis, and sort of as needed, we're always happy to come back and report.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to need to do some check-ins, 3-6 months in, I think, and get feedback from community on how they think it's going. Okay, thank you.
And I expect that will probably be here in part because of the fee study and whether the assumptions of the fee study are still valid. And
cool. That's good, because I'm on this one.
Yeah.
I'm on this committee, so that's 5 on me.
Mr. Blumenfield, sorry.
Okay. First, on the cutting it close issue with help me understand, because as I understand it, the CAO report says the portal is going to be launched on July 1st, and the law requires that people are registered by July 1st. So that seems like it only gives us 24 hours to do this. How are we dealing with that seeming contradiction?
Yeah, Arthi Varma. So again, the effective date of the ordinance is July 1st. The ordinance also requires actually the administrative guidelines that lay out the processes and procedures for how hosts register with the city to be laid out, and for those administrative guidelines to be brought forth to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee once they're completed. So that opportunity to lay out that process will give us an ability to have a rollout period, whether that be 30 days, 60 days. We haven't determined that as of yet, but that can be laid out in the administrative guidelines.
So as long as we start by July, they don't all have to be registered by July 1st.
Well, I think we want the program to be successful, and so we want to create a process that allows hosts to be able to register in a timely manner. And I believe the ordinance, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, allows for, if you have a pending registration, for enforcement not to be taken upon until that application has been processed.
So so the processing may start July 1st, but we'll get a month or something to do it. Is that it?
Yeah, I think
You go backwards a month or you go forwards a month is my question.
I think we're hoping to have this done ahead of time and where we could even start the registration process before July 1st. If that cannot happen, then I think just as a city, we can take a position of, allowing folks a 30-day, 60-day window to have that registration process before we start enforcing. I think it's only just fair to give people time to come in the door. As Arthi said, once you've submitted registration, you'll be considered pending, and we won't enforce against that. You won't be enforced against until we've officially said, no, you don't have a pending or a registration status, and that can take place sometime after if we need to. But I think just in the interest of fairness, we wouldn't be, we've given you, 24 hours to register. That would not be fair. So I think we'd be mindful of that.
When we were doing this, one of the last-minute things that happened that, over my objection, actually, was the addition of ADUs that are not primary residents if they were built prior to 2017, which I still don't understand why that's in there. But my question is, does that make enforcement much more difficult, or is that something that can be fairly easily calculated into all this?
Yeah, planning, Matt Glesney. We've looked at that. We have pretty good access to ADU permit data, and we've looked at it, and it does have sort of a permit date that I think would allow us to have a pretty clear line knowing which ADUs were permitted before that 2017 and which were not. So I think we're prepared to enforce that. Yeah.
Okay. Another question, when you talk about the screenshots getting the addresses, do the screenshots actually have the addresses? Because that's always been the problem, is that when you go on the website, unless you put your credit card down, you're not going to actually see the address. So how do we translate that into actually addresses that can be matched up against a database?
We let Host Compliance answer that.
Ulrich Binzer, founder and CEO of Host Compliance. So that's part of the secret sauce. So what we do is we extract all the information from these listings, and then we cross-reference it with a number of other data sources. And then we actually, as a final step, have trained analysts look at the data and actually providing evidence using the preponderance of evidence standard, which is the typical administrative standard for code enforcement, to actually document the match to the particular address. And then that information is presented in a very easy to digest way for the city staff to look at and validate that we found the right property.
And what's the accuracy rate?
It's very high, about 99%.
Okay. In terms of the launching all this, has planning been dealing with ITA? Is the city's network capable of handling this? Are there IT concerns in terms of making sure this succeeds from our end?
Arthi Varma with Planning. We have been working with ITA and will continue to work with ITA as we roll out the implementation. My understanding is that it's a cloud-based platform, so that we will be able to support technologically the new system.
So it's not going to be on our network?
My understanding is that it's cloud-based, correct.
Okay. So are there any IT concerns in terms of our IT in making this work, or is it all outside of our, like even just the cross-referencing of all this data with our data to make the enforcement possible? Is that something that we do in-house?
I know we have some of our tech staff. I don't know if ITA is here. We've shopped the contract around to both our IT staff and the ITA. I don't know if they're here. If any comments, but
if ITA has a comment on it, or
Tricia Keene, Department of City Planning. I think we have, as Arthi mentioned, we have been coordinating with ITA, and we've been working with our own internal director of systems from our IT division to ensure that from a technology standpoint, we don't have any impacts to the city's infrastructure. As Arthi mentioned, it is a cloud-based system, so there will be little to no impact on the actual infrastructure that the city has for our backbone network. And really, at this point, what we understand working with the host compliance team, too, is that any technology issues that may come up are all solvable. They're just something that we will develop the right interface and connections with, so we shouldn't have any issues.
Great. That's something I worry about with our folks. We have great ITA folks. I'm just saying this is a new world. And I've heard concerns with ITA in the past on this area. So, okay, great. I guess the last question in terms of, this is a sole source contract, is that right? And we're going, I assume it's sort of a piggyback issue, is that how it works? If you could explain that.
So Tricia Keene, Department of City Planning. Yes, we are working with, we have worked closely with the City Attorney's Office to confirm the appropriate process for this contract, but it is a piggyback contract off of a competitively bid contract. So we are confident working with the City Attorney's Office that we have followed the correct process.
Thank you.
Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, appreciate the efforts. This has been a long time coming, and I know we all are anxious that if there's some teeth to enforce this hard work that we're all doing. Let me just direct you back. I know that you've been asked to report back on fee exemptions or creating a structure for economically disadvantaged patrons. I wonder if you have any thoughts along that. Can you give us some guidance on what's been occurring in other jurisdictions and kind of how that discussion is moving forward?
Arthi Varma with Planning. I know that was a request, and I think we are continuing to look to other cities to look at examples for when there could be some exemptions, and we'll be happy to kind of provide that with our report back on the administrative guidelines.
When will that occur?
That will be 60 days before the implementation.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Kretz?
Yeah, a couple more questions. One specific following up on Bob's question, which is, what about the first day? Everyone thinks they have to do it on July 1st. They've been given 24 hours, and everybody goes online. Any chance we crash the system? I'm not technically knowledgeable enough to know whether it's a cloud system, whether that allows us to avoid a system crashing if we get 10,000 people, all within a few hours of each other, all trying to go online.
Arthi Varma with Planning. That's a great question. Speaking back to the rollout process, part of the reason we are requesting the staff request is to ensure that we can create the materials for outreach and education so folks know there will be a process. Not everyone has to do it on July 1st. I might ask Host Compliance, our IT vendor, to come up who has some experience administering this in other cities to see if their system can support multiple users applying on the same day.
Thank you. Yeah, as Mrs. Warmer said, you definitely want to educate the public so they don't all believe that they should go online at midnight on the day of the ordinance going into effect, because obviously that does create risk. That said, we do have a lot of technical ways to deal with that. One, we use something called Cloudflare, which is a specific system designed to deal with these kinds of situations. So we actually have many what's called edge locations of our software operating close to the user so they can't really crash it because they won't all hit the same server at the same time. Secondly, we work with Amazon Web Services, which is the largest provider. Amazon Web Services, which is the largest provider of cloud-based data centers, and they have the ability to constantly scale up and down the servers as you need it, so there shouldn't be any risk on this.
And sort of a follow-up to this, but not directly, are we looking at enough staff and enough funding to start so that we don't have sort of a replay of what we've seen with our cannabis system, where we didn't really staff up enough, we didn't put enough money behind it, and it got off to more of a slow start, which certainly it's a net loss financially for us than if we had done it more quickly and more efficiently. Are we looking at being able to staff up quickly enough? Are we funded enough? Because there's no advantage to trying to be team players and saying, well, we don't want to put much of a strain on the budget, because I think getting started in a way that's too slow puts more of a strain.
Arthi Varma with Planning. The request that's before you today is the interim request through the end of this fiscal year. We do believe with the 6 positions along with the IT contract, we will be ready to gear up. That said, this is a very intensive work program, and we will be submitting an additional budget request part of it is it's hard to know exactly how many applications we're going to get and how many extended home sharing applications we're going to get. So as we see those numbers coming in, we'll want to be able to staff up. But our request includes enough staff to launch the program now with these 6 positions and future requests to grow the program as we continue to move forward.
Yeah, I'd certainly encourage you to ask for everything you need rather than let a smaller ask come in, because it really doesn't benefit us.
All right. We have one card. Thank you all. We have one card on this item. John Choi. I can ask you to come on up, Mr. Choi. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Just before I start, 1 minute? Okay, I will jump right in. So thank you, John Choi with Airbnb. Just wanted to flag a couple of issues. We have worked with hundreds of cities all around the world on regulations, and just want to flag that it is incredibly important to understand the amount of work and time it takes to create an effective system for registration and compliance. These systems are complex, and even when cities have put in a lot of thoughtful work to try and streamline, the work involved is tremendous. In other cities, we've begun working with city staff, both on the technical side as well as on the permitting and sort of registration side, several months ahead of the law taking effect, so that we can best assist the city in informing our hosts of their requirements and obligations. In LA, we have just about 19,000 active hosts on our platform alone, not including other platforms, and it'll be incredibly difficult to educate and inform this community in such a short timeline. Final piece here is, if any of the components of the registration system, which are outlined, I think, generally in the law, currently requires any sort of data sharing or commitments from the platforms, it is really important for us to be able to program closely with the city ahead of time, both on a technical side as well as on an operational side, to make sure that our systems are set to work with the cities. I think that we still have a lot of questions about how that will work and how we will actually cooperate towards those goals.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, members, any other questions or comments? Is there any objection to moving forward with approval of the CAO's recommendations? All right, seeing none, that will be the action of the committee. All right, that brings up item number 9.
Item number 9 is the Department of General Services report relative to a hiring plan for custodial services using the Targeted Local Hire Program and an analysis of possible savings from the elimination of contract oversight costs. The Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee approved the matter as amended on January 16, 2019. Information Technology and General Services concurred with the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee report on February 13, 2019.
Great, thank you. And members, you should have that amendment before you on your desk. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Cesar Avalos, Assistant Director to Custodial Services Division. The report before you instructed GSD to develop a hiring plan to hire and utilize the Targeted Local Hire Program. In addition, funds totaling $2.8 million were set aside from GSD's budget into the UB. In response, we developed a pilot program to hire 12 TLH candidates and bring several contracted facilities back in-house. The program consists of hiring and training through classroom, practical, and a mentoring program, TLH candidates. Implementation of the training program requires for staff to prepare the curriculum, implement the hiring, and get the training up and running. The hiring plan expands over the course of 3 years with the potential to hire and train up to 40 TLH candidates. An added benefit of implementing this program is that we can utilize the TLH candidates to backfill our regular vacancies. This report actually assumed that the program would be up and running during the current fiscal year. However, this fiscal year comes to a close within the next 3 months, and we are proposing 3 modifications to the report. The first one is to transfer the $2.8 million back to GSD's budget so that we can continue services to 135 facilities. Number 2 is the approval and confirmation of the 4 staff needed to prepare the training curriculum. GSD will use salary savings to fund these positions during the current fiscal year. And the third modification is for GSD to report back within 6 months on the status of the program. At this time, if you have any questions.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but I do just want to thank the department for moving forward assertively with this plan to implement targeted local hire. I think it's an important step forward, and GSD is probably one of the departments in the city best suited to be able to put people to work right away through targeted local hire. So I appreciate the responsiveness to our requests in this area. Members, questions, comments? Mr. Blumenfield.
Well, first up, I want to associate myself with your comments. I'm thrilled that we're moving forward with targeted local hire. It's a big priority for all of us, and I support those efforts. But I want to make sure we also have our eyes wide open and understand the trade-offs. And the budget recommendation asks for the analysis of possible savings from the elimination of contract oversight costs, but I didn't see that highlighted in the report. So what I'd like to see at some point is the cost of the program versus the cost of contracting the work out, you know, the total compensation under the target local hire versus contracting out, and so we have our eyes wide open. We should be investing in this program for good reason, but I want to be able to have all the numbers to defend us and to know what is our investment because of homelessness, what is our investment because of pure cost savings, and just move forward in a good way with our eyes open and having those numbers. Because they don't necessarily have to balance out, but I want us to know them.
Okay. Anything else, members? All right. Well, if there's no objection, then it will be the action of the committee to approve the recommendations as amended by the written amendment that's before you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, that takes us then next to our closed session items, and public comment on items 1, 2, and 3 is closed. So we will proceed for public comment. So, all right, we're back in open session. I only need 2 of you. So. Oh, for sure. All right, Mr. Previn, thank you very much for your patience. Come on up for general public comment. Followed by Mr. Spindler.
Thank you. It's Eric Previn from Studio City, and I just wanted to update you about the appellate court's opinion that was filed on February 22nd in a case called Eric Previn versus the City of Los Angeles. I'm going to just cut to the chase and read a small section of it. It basically says, given the plain language of the statute and its legislative history, we find that the Brown Act does not permit limiting comment at special city council meetings based on comments at prior distinct committee meetings. Previn adequately alleged a claim that he was improperly denied the opportunity to comment on the agenda item at a special meeting. Previn also adequately alleged a pattern of conduct by the city at special city council meetings in violation of the Brown Act. He therefore stated a claim in his amended petition for a writ of mandate and complaint for declaratory relief under the Brown Act. So, you know, it's good for the good guys, bad for the bad guys, but we're all the same. And what we want to do is comply with the law. So I'm asking you to take these things very seriously and come into compliance with the open government laws here in Los Angeles. So thank you. And you'll find the opinion around.
Yes. So I took an opportunity to read that unpublished opinion. I'm going to move that it be, Mr. Spindler's going to move that it be a published opinion and introduced to the grand jury of Inri Weezar et al. And I think Mr. Bonin and Mr. Price, members of Plum, will also be included. Why? Because you shut down public comment on a pattern and practice of the Brown Act to do what? To cover up a criminal conspiracy. See, you cocksuckers think you're so fucking smart denying public comment. You don't do that when you're under an FBI probe. So you got fucked by Mike Fear in the ass, like Bonin does every night, and you know now that you're engaged in a cover-up, and that's called an overt act under civil RICO. So we will apply our options. And finally, bad news for you assholes. Thank you very much.
All right, there being no other business before the committee, we are adjourned.